Welcome back to Sika. Today we are doing Huanhua or Giga Chad split jerk. Now there's two things we want to focus on here as usual with this series, and then we're going to look at some ways you can implement this in your training. The first place we want to look at is Huanhua's tempo in his split jerk. So he uploaded a 240 kilo split jerk. I know we've covered him already in this series, but he's clean, but I had to return. I was thinking about him all week, and then he uploaded that 240 kilo split jerk and it had to be done. The first place we want to look at is the tempo he uses in his dip and drive. So the issue a lot of people run into is the tempo they use in their dip and drive is very, very slow. It's very, very disjointed. And the speed at which you enter that dip is sometimes too fast, sometimes it's too slow. Then the time you spend in the bottom position is very often far too long. Now the issue with being too slow coming out of the bottom of the dip, spending too long in the bottom of the dip at that bottom portion, is the fact that this reduces your power output hugely. You need to think of yourself as a spring, and the faster you compress that spring and the faster you let it go, the better that spring will be. And essentially a lot of parts of your body are acting as springs. Your muscles and your tendons are acting like springs to release and attenuate the power produced by your muscles. So watch Huanhua jerking here, watch 240, watch 200, watch how smooth he moves between his dip and drive, and pull up a video of your own split jerk in training at pretty heavy weights and look at how slow you are coming out of the bottom of that. Look at how smooth he looks. Look at how he almost spends no time in the bottom. Of course, there is some pause. If he's changing direction, he has to come to a full stop, of course. But for want of practical effect in your training, we'll see that it essentially looks like there's zero pause in the bottom. It's a really smooth tempo. Notice it's pretty fast, but not so fast that the barbell doesn't separate from his chest. Not so fast that he dips too deep. Not so fast that he has a hard time turning around the direction coming out of the bottom. You'll see that the dip depth is excellent, and this allows him then to hit this beautiful tempo where he comes into the dip really fast and he comes into the drive even faster. Now this is exceptionally useful because it allows you to be essentially more powerful than you would if you were to do a pause jerk. Every one of you know that if you do pause jerks, unless your name is clock off, you're going to be pretty far away from your best split jerk when you don't pause in the bottom of the dip. Now that's not to say pause dip jerks aren't a useful exercise, but training that tempo is incredibly important, and being aware of it is one of the first places you need to look at when you're trying to correct this. If you're too slow, what we'll often see is you'll have a hard time changing direction quickly enough because we're laboring that dip, if we're carrying that weight really heavy on our chest. If we come into that dip very, very slowly, we're going to have a hard time exiting really quickly. We can also have the issue where we dip too fast. This is a super common problem. What we see in the amateur scene is lifters will dip, the barbell will actually separate from their chest. We'll see this change in height of the barbell. We'll see this, the lifter will separate from the barbell. The barbell will reach the bottom as well at the same time. So this will mess up your timing, but also mess up your ability to express power from your legs because you don't have a continuous connection with the barbell through your torso from your legs. The conduit there is the torso. And if we see a separation there, we're messing up that timing, but we're also messing up our ability to effectively apply power and speed into that barbell. One of the other benefits of a very smooth dip and drive is the confidence it gives you when you're doing split jerks. If you make this an autonomous action, if you make something that's second nature to you, when you're doing a dip and drive with a really nice tempo, it gives you this confidence that the barbell feels like it's your friend. It feels like you're using the oscillation of the barbell effectively, because that is something you need to do to be an effective split jerker. Once you start moving, even at the 120 plus, if we can start timing ourselves a little bit with oscillation, even with competition plates, if we can learn this tempo, this style of tempo reacts incredibly well with the barbell. The more disjointed your tempo are, the more out of connection you'll be with the oscillation and the elasticity of the barbell, and the harder this will make for you to have an effective split jerk. So if you were looking at this like a wave pattern, if you imagine that stereotypical wave pattern that you would have seen in physics or engineering, this really smooth pattern, that's how we want it to be for that jerk. We're not spending too long in any one place, and we're making sure that we're exiting that dip as effectively and as quickly as possible. Now, the second area I want to look at in regards to Huanhua or Giga Chad split jerk is his stability. Now, stability is very, very interesting because stability is closely tied to a number of areas. One of those is technique, which is the point of this series. Of course, technical perfection is one of the most important things you need to strive for in weightlifting. You'll never be able to achieve it, but every lifter, the elite level all the way down, should be striving for that. And the best lifters I've ever met are all lifters who are always looking for technical perfection. So that's one of the areas that obviously a stable split jerk is a technically perfect or a technically very good split jerk. But there's other aspects involved in the split jerk that make for high levels of stability, mainly strength and mobility, ability to actually get into these positions. So this is somewhat of a nebulous concept when we come to the technique of the split jerk, but it's outrageously important, especially again in the amateur and the intermediate scene. Stability in the split jerk makes a massive difference. We can have an excellent dip and drive, we can have a good split jerk position, we can be really strong, easy cleans, but if we're not stable in that split jerk position, not only are you probably going to get red lighted in competition, which I know Huanhua has also been, but for the most part he's a very slick and powerful jerker. If you want to get into the split jerk as smoothly as him, maintain the stability and confidence like he is in the split jerk, you need to train stability or look for ways of enhancing that in your training. So again, it's this concept that involves a lot of different areas, but technical perfection is one of those. Great thing about being very stable in the split jerk like Giga Chad is that more often than not you'll be able to save some jerks that you wouldn't be able to do. It'll also make you more efficient in training with your energy. So if you lack the ability to stabilize heavy jerks in training, you'll find that you're going to miss more jerks than you should have. You'll be missing more sub-maximal jerks than you should be. You'll also find as well that when you're doing multiple sets and reps and you're doing 2+2 or 1+2 or reps on the jerk, you'll find that these will be harder, you'll be more inefficient, and as a result you won't be able to do as much meaningful volume with those. You won't be able to reliably progress the volume, and you also won't be able to reliably predict how good your jerk is going to be at heavier weights, because if you're a competition lifter, that's going to be very, very important. That final split jerk is the most missed lift in any competition, the third split jerk. And if you're very, very stable, you're going to be able to reliably predict what your split jerk is going to be in terms of calling your attempts, or for your coach, or when you're in training. Let's say you clean and jerked 140, but you're super unreliable, you barely made it. Going next, what would you attempt next? It can be hard to predict for yourself and for your lifters or for your coach to pick. But if you're someone who's outrageously stable, if you have a fantastic stability in that split jerk position, you're going to give yourself an opportunity to reliably make more attempts in terms of actually what you can estimate is the next good attempt for you. But for you, confidence, if you nail 140 and you've never done 145 before, but you absolutely stick it with no doubt, you're going to have a huge amount of psychological confidence coming into that next attempt. Whereas if you do one of those reps where you're doing a little celebration at the top, you're doing a little Nino, and you think to yourself, ooh, I gotta add 5 more kilos to this, how likely is that? So a huge part of stability, of course, is making good lifts, but there's a psychological aspect to the stability of the split jerk that's often forgotten about. You know yourself, when you nail a lift, a snatch, a clean, or a jerk, it gives you a lot of confidence to push those weights, and this stability helps you nail excellent split jerks. Now, how do we train the first part of our technique that we're looking at today, the dip and drive tempo? Well, one of the first areas, you've heard me say it a few times, is having a very good front squat. Now, the heaviest front squat we've seen from Giga Chad when he's a 102 lifter is 275 kilos. That's just over 600 pounds. This is a massive lift. We've seen him clean and jerking in the 225s. He's probably capable of clean and jerking into the 230s. So the amount he can front squat compared to his clean and jerk is high. It's great to have this kind of ratio. You don't necessarily need that much, but it makes his ability to move through that dip and drive of the jerk absolutely fantastic. Now, this is something that is both the absolute weight you can do, but how much you practice front squats. So having a big front squat isn't enough. Practicing front squats frequently is one of the ways we can improve this dip and drive. This dip and drive is essentially a front squat, albeit a very, very short one. It's a 1/5 front squat. Being able to front squat 275 kilos to full depth is going to make jerking 225 kilos a lot easier. Now, if you're front squatting, let's say 140 again or 120, let's say you're clean and jerking 120, front squatting something like 150 to 160 would be a good place to be at. So your confidence and your ability, just that actual physicality you need to change direction, is going to be so much higher when you're split jerking. So remember, we need to think about split jerking as our sport specific movement. Then we think of our front squat as that high force movement. When we're looking at, for example, vertical jumps, full depth back squats are a huge component at having a very high vertical jump. If you look at the vertical jump world record holder, Isaiah, he loves full depth squats. I think he primarily loves full depth front squats, interestingly, but they're a huge component of that. So if we think about his jumping as our split jerk, supporting that with high force movements allows us to transfer the ability to be fast and powerful when we're doing our sport specific movements. So it's the same way the front squat transfers to that split jerk. That's really what we're looking for. Now we do see Leo Huanhua doing jerk dips sometimes static holds, sometimes jerk dips. Static holds, I think, are completely useless. I'll just be honest. I think they're an absolutely useless exercise. We don't ever program them. I don't really know any lifters personally who are very good who use them. Jerk dips are a slightly grey area. I'm not fully against jerk dips. The one area I find jerk dips might be useful is when you're starting to lift into the 180 plus range, maybe 170 plus range, and you need to practice some training with the tempo of the barbell. Jerk dips can give you that opportunity where you do multiple jerk dips, you're oscillating the barbell, the elasticity of the barbell is going, and you're getting used to that timing. But I haven't found jerk dips to be really that useful in training the tempo. I'm not saying it's not going to work for you at all, but I haven't found it to be that effective. And when we're trying to be really efficient with our training, really smart with our selections, I found that front squats just cover a lot more bases. Obviously, it's a strength exercise. Obviously, it's going to carry over somewhat to the clean as well. Whereas jerk dips are primarily left with the split jerk. What I often find as well is people go far too heavy with their jerk dips. They go super maximal, which doesn't seem to serve any purpose. It seems to be very, very fatiguing, and I just haven't seen it transfer to the jerk that well. So the front squat is one of the best areas we're looking at when we're chaining that dip and drive tempo. Now, of course, as we always talk about, the actual intention behind which you do your jerk, dip and drive tempo is massively important. So actually practicing that, trying to hit the right tempo, hitting the right depth, being intentional with it is incredibly important. But in the split jerk, we do need that physicality to support it, and that comes from primarily massive front squats. Now, when it comes to training the stability of the split jerk, very luckily, when it comes to Leo Huanhua's training, we've got a load of great exercises on video. These come from his Instagram, Liu Xiaojun Barbell YouTube. We've got Weightlifting House as well. Very thankfully, I've put these online for us to see, to show us some of the examples of what we could use. Now, really interestingly, if you've run any of the Sika strength weightlifting programs, you'll have seen a lot of these exercises. And the first one that is the most useful exercise by far for increasing your stability in the split jerk is the strict press. More so than the push press, more so than any other assistance exercise, the strict press is top 2 exercises for the split jerk in our opinion. Increasing your strict press, you would not believe how useful this is for you to increase your stability, your confidence, your follow through rate, your power in finishing the split jerk. Now, I know you might be asking or questioning is, sometimes we've heard some good elite international weightlifters say they didn't strict press very much. Turokity comes to mind. I think he said he was strict pressing like 90 kilos. You know, people like Liu Xiaojun. Unfortunately for Liu Xiaojun's case, he has outed himself when we've seen him doing dips with something like 100 kilos. So I think he's getting away in that portion. Either way, you're probably not an elite international weightlifter. So for you, the strict press is going to be one of the main exercises for increasing your stability. Now, the great thing about strict press is it's pretty low fatigue. We can do pretty high frequency. We can do it 2 to 3 times a week when we're trying to improve our strict press, and it's pretty low fatigue. We can do it at the end of the session. And the really interesting thing about the strict press for weightlifting is you don't actually have to do the heavy weights to get the benefits to your split jerk position in that overhead position. What you need to do is be doing the strict press and you'll get most of the benefits. You don't ever actually have to max out your strict press to get the benefits. The act of doing moderate to high volume is the benefit, with moderate to slightly heavier weights is going to give you most of the benefits. It's actually a skill development as much as it is a strength development. Now, of course, definitely strength development for sure. Increasing the strength of those muscles, the raw component. The strict press is one of the all-time greats of increasing that just kind of raw pressing capacity. But the actual stability, remember, stability is as much a skill as anything else. Your body's ability to remain in a relatively stable pattern and motion going into a particular position. If you train this under a lot of tension, we give ourselves an opportunity to train this skill specifically, and this portion from going from our chest to the overhead position is going to be trained incredibly well by strict press. Now, the other areas we can see are things like Lu raises, which are very useful for mobility. Mainly focus on our delts, traps, mid traps for stability overhead. We've got stuff like leg extensions, which also are very useful for that dip and drive as a tertiary assistance exercise. We've got stuff like weighted push-ups, all of which are great assistance exercises. So just general upper body training is one of the reasons we'll see Chinese lifters, whether that's squat jerking, power jerking or split jerking, have some of the most stable overhead positions, is because they could do a lot of this assistance work. Now for you, when it comes to this assistance work, you don't need to take these to failure. You don't need to be worrying so much about how much volume do I need to do? How close to failure is this? Is this a stretch mediated one? Am I on the right tension? Is my biomechanical leverage okay here? You don't need to worry about that. You just need to be doing any amount of upper body bodybuilding work, as we'll call it, upper body assistance work, with some reasonable frequency. Twice a week can be good, 3 times a week can be great, depending on what you're doing. And this will massively improve your capacity to be stable in the overhead position. If you give all of these upper body movements, if you give me 3 months of this and you go after with some diligence, I promise you, you will not know your split jerk by the end of it. Your snatch overhead position will improve as well, but your split jerk position precisely will be unbelievably more powerful and stable than you can imagine. So I don't often use superlatives, but in this case, this is something I've seen hugely, especially with the amateur intermediate lifter. When you're lacking a bit of that upper body strength, it's going to make a big difference. Now, if you'd like to improve your split jerk, you can check out the jerk only program on the Sika Strength app. You can do our upper body bodybuilding program on the app. So this is specifically meant for weightlifters who are running maybe our weightlifting program. This is our bodybuilding program on the app. These are shorter sessions, about 20 minutes, 3 times per week. There's going to be a couple of blocks of those. The first one is up on the app already. You can run maybe our squatting programs, our mainstream weightlifting program. There's a front squat program coming to the app relatively soon. So check those out. Sika Strength app, iOS and Android. Hope you're enjoying this series. Let me know if there's anyone you'd like to see next.